Thanks, Randy. Well, the pressure's on. I will do my best to share my story with you. As Randy said, I do a lot of things with our foundation. I partner with Tracy regularly. But the most important job that I have is I am mom to Katie, Sam, and Joseph. Katie is 21, Sam is 17, and Joseph is 14 and a half. 9 years ago, I very naively took Joseph to the pediatrician because I was concerned about some signs I was seeing in that he wasn't running, he was never able to ride a bike, and he was never able to climb steps 1 foot at a time. It was always 2 feet and pulling very hard on the railing to get up steps. And I didn't know any better, and I thought, oh, how tough is that gonna be for my little 5-year-old? He might need physical therapy. So I took him to the pediatrician, and she did some physical assessments, and she left the room, and she came back about 5 minutes later, and she handed me an appointment card, and she said, you have an appointment with a neurologist in Ann Arbor tomorrow. So instantly, my heart stopped beating, I was struggling to get air, and all innocent thoughts of physical therapy flew out of my head, and I knew that suddenly a line had been drawn, and our lives were going from before to after whatever was gonna happen in that neurologist's office. So the next day, 18 hours later, we had an appointment with the neurologist. He had some preliminary blood work drawn on Joseph, which was enough for him to 99% be sure that Joseph had Duchenne. Now, I'd never heard the word before. I had to practice pronouncing it the week after Joseph was diagnosed. And he said Duchenne, and he said it's muscular dystrophy. And he said, this disease will break down Joseph's muscles. He will lose the ability to walk, and then it will attack his upper extremities, and ultimately, it will attack his heart and his lungs. So I said to him, well, what's the prognosis? I was still holding on to hope. And he said, there's nothing. We don't have a cure. We don't have a treatment. And it is 100% fatal. So instantly, you think all sorts of things. My first thought was, this isn't happening to me, but it was. And so I had some really difficult decisions to make. The very first thing that I had to decide, what was I gonna teach my children about adversity? And I knew I had to fight for Joseph. So I said to the doctor, what do I do now, and what do we do? And he said, we'll set you up with an appointment with a specialist in 8 weeks. And I said, 8 weeks? You just gave me the most devastating news imaginable, and you want me to go home and wait 8 weeks? And he reached across his desk, and he sort of patronizingly patted my hand, and he said, Marissa, that's just the way it works. So I sat back in my chair, and I crossed my arms, and I looked at him, and I said, not anymore. I said, I am not leaving this chair until you get me an appointment with that specialist. I said, I don't care how you find him. You can text him, you can page him, you can Facebook him, find him. I'm not leaving. So at that point, he turned and looked at my ex-husband, kind of raised his eyebrows, and my ex-husband just closed his eyes and shook his head silently. And women know what that is. That's the secret language of men. It's the international guide code for just do what she says and nobody gets hurt. So the neurologist turned back to me and he said, okay, I'll email him. So he typed away on his computer and he said, I sent him an email, I'll wait for him to get back to me. Now in retrospect, I sort of think he might have been emailing security, but nonetheless, he called me the next morning and we had an appointment. And I knew then that no one would fight for Joseph like I would. The other decision I had to make was, how would we make this journey count? Because this whole night is about situations which we can't control what we're handed, but we can always, always control how we handle it. I tell my kids that's called being a grown-up. And so I had to decide what I believed about this diagnosis. And the one thing I knew for sure is everything that neurologist told us about loss of ambulation and heart failure and pulmonary distress and Joseph being in a wheelchair by the time he was 12, what I knew for sure is every single statistic was a history lesson. Statistics are a compilation of facts that have already happened. And what I knew is that we could change the statistics for the future, and we could create a future for our kids. We could change the story, and that's what we're all about. What I know that Matt believed, and Jen and Randy and everybody associated with this, is that we can leave our diseases better than we found them. You know, shortly after Joseph was diagnosed, a casual acquaintance approached me, and I know she was well-meaning. But she approached me and she said, Marissa, does Joseph know that it's terminal? And I wanted to punch her, but I held back and I said, and I was in the very beginning stages of grief for my old life I thought I was gonna have. And I just flung back at her and I said, do your kids know they're terminal? And she looked at me in horror and she said, what are you talking about? I said, we all have a fatal diagnosis. It's called life. We're all terminal. Nobody gets out of here alive. Not this room tonight. I mean, in general. So the decision isn't, can we avoid heartache and pain? It's what do we do with it? Some people may think that my greatest fear is losing my son. And of course that weighs heavy on me. But what I'm most afraid of is Joseph's suffering. And as a mom, what terrifies me more than anything is that my little boy is losing the ability to hug me. That's what hurts me more than the thought of losing him. That should never happen. What's worse than the thought of losing Joseph is that 2 years ago he lost ambulation. He's been confined to a scooter and now a power wheelchair full-time. Joseph shouldn't have to wait at the lunch table to take a drink until one of his buddies can open his water bottle because his hands are too weak to do it himself. Joseph should not need me to help him in the shower. He should not need me to lift him onto the toilet, but he does. My daughter, Katie, is 21, and she's the most amazing young woman that I think I could ever know. I always say to her, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. And tonight, while we're here, my 21-year-old daughter should not be helping her 14-year-old brother change his clothes to get ready for bed. The Secklers and I both have sons named Sam, who are 17 and are graduating, getting ready to go to college. Our Sams, they should not be afraid to roughhouse and wrestle with their little brothers for fear of hurting them. My parents, Joseph's grandparents, they should not feel heartache on every one of his birthdays because they know that another candle on the cake is one less year that we have with him. But we can change this. We are changing this. Leonard Cohen, the poet, musician, writer, once sang, "There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." And there are days, there are moments where I think my heart is cracked so wide open, it's gotta be lit up like the 4th of July. But for us, Duchenne is the crack in our world, but you are the light that's getting in. The challenge for all of us is not can we avoid heartache and suffering, because it's coming for all of us if it hasn't already. None of us are immune. The challenge is, can we give it meaning? Can we give our heartache and our suffering meaning? And because of you, and because of Matt, and because of Jen, and because of the whole circle of friends, and every single person sitting here tonight, we have great hope, and there's real progress. We are changing the statistics. This year, on September 19th, one day after Joseph's 14th birthday, the FDA finally, after a Herculean effort and a gut-wrenching battle that Tracy and I were both deeply immersed in, the FDA, for the first time, approved a treatment for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. This treatment will help only 13% of boys with Duchenne. It will not help Charlie, and it will not help Joseph. So we're incredibly proud, but we are not satisfied. There is so much left to do. There are about 800 people in this room tonight, so let me help you understand how many boys are waiting for us to help them. There are about 25,000 boys with Duchenne in the United States. That would mean approximately we would have to fill this room with Duchenne boys at every single seat for 31 days straight, different boys every night. Fill this room for 1 month, every seat at every table with Duchenne boys. That's how many need us and need our help, and that's only in the United States. They're counting on us. And we are close. We are so close for so many. And the way I help people understand this is I say, this plane has been cleared for takeoff. When we make progress, sometimes people think, okay, I did my part, they're doing great, you know, it's looking good, there's a treatment for 13%. But I'll tell you something, I flew in here this afternoon from Detroit, and when we were sitting on the runway waiting to take off, I certainly did not want my pilot to come on and say, hey folks, we're barreling down the runway, I'm just gonna let my foot off the gas a little bit and still hope this thing gets up in the air. This plane has been cleared for takeoff. That means right now we are barreling down the runway to a treatment or a cure for every single boy battling Duchenne. So now more than effort, we need maximum throttle, we need full speed ahead, we need all hands on deck more than we ever have. One of my favorite quotes comes from a Roman warrior, and he said, what we do with our lives echoes in eternity. And I know in my gut that what we are doing here tonight is so significant that none of us will ever live long enough to see the impact of all the people and all the generations it touches. What we're doing here tonight will protect future generations of boys from suffering, and it will protect future generations of parents from hearing the most devastating diagnosis imaginable. That means for all of you, that takes you from a life of importance to a life of significance. And I know some of you are just saying, hey lady, I just came here because my buddy bought a table. And that's okay, we love you too. But once you're in the family, you are so stuck with us, so buckle up. So I'm going to wrap up. We're about to have the auctioneer come out. What I want to say tonight is my hope for you is this. First of all, tonight, I hope that you find Tracy and Benji. I hope that you find Randy, and I hope that you find Jen, and I hope you hug them, and I hope you tell them thank you. Because we're in the business of raising money and funding research and thanking people all the time. But I hope that through what you experienced tonight or have for the last 12 years, that you feel like being here and being a part of this miracle that we're creating, I hope you feel like it's a gift to you. I hope that you leave here with a greater understanding and appreciation for how fragile all of this is for all of us. And I'm talking about life. I hope that you leave here and you laugh a little louder, you forgive a little faster, and you love more freely. And most of all, I hope that when that auctioneer comes out, you continue to embrace the whole notion of the impact that we're making tonight. And I don't want you to give until it hurts. I want you to give until it feels good. And what I'm asking you to do tonight on behalf of Charlie and Joseph and every other boy with Duchenne, I am asking you to raise your hand, to raise your placard, to honor my son, who can no longer raise his own hand. Thank you.